You have no idea who this thing is, do you?
When I reviewed Disco Elysium back in 2019, I gave it a score of 9.6. Here was my verdict. Disco Elysium is a unique blend of noir detective fiction, traditional pen and paper RPGs, and a large helping of existentialist theory. Its twisting plot, cast of memorable characters, and sheer depth of choice combine to create an experience that begs to be savoured. A few minor gripes aside, it hits on almost every single one of the marks it sets out to achieve, and left me yearning to spend more time in its world. For more on the fundamentals of what makes this game great, make sure to check out that original review. Here, I'll talk about the changes and why I think it's even better in Disco Elysium: The Final Cut. Disco Elysium: The Final Cut expands on its original cast to include fully voiced performances for every character, but none make more of an impact than the 24 different sections of your brain that accompany you throughout the journey. To emphasise just how important they are, roughly half of the more than 1 million words spoken in this sprawling RPG belong to your character's innermost thoughts.
It is too large for a bullet, yet too small for a piece of furniture. You're looking for something heavy and larger than your fist.
Voicing all 24 of these cerebral incarnations is jazz musician Lenville Brown, who masterfully breathes new life into Zalm's tome of a script. His bass-heavy, calming yet authoritative voice guides you as much as it does educate you on the world of Revachol. The casting for this role was always going to be crucial to the success of The Final Cut, but after hearing the gravitas and depth Brown brings to it, it's hard to imagine Disco Elysium any other way.
These lithe, pointy-eared creatures appear to be different types of Welkins.
Every person you meet in Martinet is now fully voiced, and it can't be overstated how much of an improvement this is over the original. The 2019 release did feature limited voicing of some characters, and the inconsistent quality of these performances was one of my few criticisms of Disco Elysium when I reviewed it back then, but I couldn't be happier with the results this time around.
The dock workers are pretty cocky. They think they're police enough. At least here on the coast. I can't say about the rest of the city.
A couple of the cast members remain, most notably those playing larger roles like Kim Kitsuragi and Everard Clare, while others that only had partially voiced roles have been changed. These include Kuno, whose new performance still carries the obnoxious essence of the character, but is nowhere near as grating on the ears as it once was.
Kuno gives this info out on a need-to-know basis, and you don't need to know.
Practically all of the newly added cast members hit the mark as well. They really add new life into the world of Disco Elysium and further reinforce the diversity that can be found in the city, with a globe full of accents and languages being spoken.
The influence of the ham sandwich race is waning.
The biggest compliment I can pay to the vocal additions is that all of the characters sounded exactly how I imagined they would when I first played. It mirrored the joy I get from first hearing an audiobook or film adaptation of one of my favourite novels, with the voices I once solely heard in my head finally played back to me.
He didn't respect the sea. Went out there drunk like a skunk, and sure enough, one day the boat was found floating empty. A bloated corpse turned up 2 weeks later.
The other most impactful addition in the Final Cut are the political vision quests. These 4 optional objectives are mutually exclusive, meaning you'll only get to see one of them per playthrough. They are tied to the political leanings you've shown during the story and add roughly 20 to 30 minutes of enjoyable new detective work. While not directly affecting the outcome of the main storyline, they do a great job of teaching you more about the world and quirky characters of Revachol, one of the main draws of Disco Elysium already.
Fight till there's no slaves below and no masters overhead.
The original release included a lot of political theory, and many of the dialogue choices you made influenced your character's leanings, from fascist to liberal and everything in between. However, there never felt like there was any sort of payoff or closure to whichever path you took. The Final Cut provides exactly what was missing by adding these questlines late into the story, allowing you to fully commit to a branch of ideological thinking. In my playthrough of The Final Cut, I chose to embrace communism, which culminated in a bizarre, bewildering, and ultimately enriching conversation with 2 new characters I wouldn't have met otherwise. Revachol and its socio-political history were always one of the key strengths of Disco Elysium, so naturally I was more than happy to delve deeper into that while simultaneously being given more opportunities to build out my protagonist and find his place in the world.
Your attention detaches. The voices of the young men fade away. It's a cool evening, you notice.
Disco Elysium is still the unique blend of noir detective fiction, traditional pen and paper RPGs, with a large helping of existentialist theory that it always was, but it's now even better than ever, removing any of the minor gripes I had with the original by adding new quests and a full cast of well-voiced characters. The final cut elevates Disco Elysium from an already phenomenal RPG to a true must-play masterpiece. For more on Disco Elysium, do check out my original review if you haven't already.